There's a quiet truth in relationships that almost nobody talks about out loud. Being liked can feel good. It can feel warm, even addictive. But being liked does not guarantee attraction, and it definitely does not guarantee respect. And here's where things get uncomfortable. A man can be liked by everyone in the room and still be the one women don't fully take seriously. Meanwhile, another man might not be universally liked, but he's the one people naturally adjust their behavior around. Why does that happen? Why do some men feel socially easy to like, yet struggle to be truly respected in dating and relationships? And more importantly, can you switch between the two without losing yourself? In the next few minutes, you're going to understand a psychological difference that changes how women experience attraction, safety, and emotional investment. We're going beyond surface level dating advice. This is about social psychology, behavioral signaling, and something researchers often describe as the difference between warmth and status perception. Because once you see this clearly, you stop guessing. You stop overthinking texts, mixed signals, and inconsistent interest, and you start understanding what is actually being communicated beneath the words. By the end of this video, you'll know why being nice often gets you emotional closeness, but not deep respect, and what actually creates both attraction and stability in how you're perceived. Let's get into it. Think about a man who always agrees, never interrupts, never challenges anyone. He's easy to talk to. People smile around him. He rarely creates tension. But now notice something subtle. People also don't adjust themselves around him. They don't hesitate before speaking. They don't pause to consider his reaction. He is liked, but he is not felt as a strong reference point. Psychologically, likability is often driven by what social psychologists call low-threat social signaling. Your behavior communicates safety, predictability, and emotional ease. But respect comes from something different: boundaries. A man who can calmly say no, who doesn't over-explain himself, who doesn't chase approval, introduces a sense of structure into social interaction. And structure creates psychological weight. Here's the practical shift. If you want respect, stop optimizing for being easy. Start optimizing for being clear. Say what works for you and what doesn't without softening it into a question. Don't over-negotiate your standards just to keep emotional harmony. And notice this: women don't lose attraction to clarity. They lose interest in inconsistency. Because inconsistency signals that your position can be shaped by pressure, and what can be shaped too easily is rarely respected. And once you understand this difference, you start realizing why being too available emotionally often reduces perceived value, even if it increases short-term liking. But boundaries alone are not enough, because respect is also built in another dimension. So let's go deeper. Transition. Now that you understand structure, we need to talk about something even more misunderstood: competence. Imagine two men in a group setting. One is extremely kind. He listens carefully. He supports everyone emotionally. He tries to make people feel comfortable. The other is also polite, but he naturally takes charge when needed. He makes decisions. He solves problems. He doesn't ask for permission to lead small situations. Now observe what happens over time. People may emotionally like the first man more in casual interaction, but when something important needs to happen, they start looking at the second man. This is competence-based respect. In psychological terms, humans unconsciously assign task value and social value to people. Kindness increases social value. Competence increases perceived authority. And in dating dynamics, especially with mature women, competence is silently tracked. It shows up in how you handle uncertainty, how you respond when plans change, how you behave when there is tension or disagreement. If your reaction is always emotional calibration, trying to avoid discomfort, you get labeled as safe but not solid. But when your response is grounded, decisive, and calm, something shifts. People start trusting your internal stability. Here's the actionable shift. Stop trying to be universally agreeable. Start being reliably decisive. Make small decisions quickly. Stick to them unless there is a real reason to change. Don't outsource your judgment just to avoid conflict. Because respect is not built when you make people comfortable. Respect is built when people realize they can rely on your internal direction. And once reliability is established, something very interesting happens in attraction dynamics. But to understand that, we need to address a mistake most men don't even realize they're making: transition. Because sometimes, the problem is not what you do, it's what your attention communicates. Picture a man who always responds instantly, always available, always checking in, always trying to keep the conversation alive. At first, this feels good to the other person. It creates a sense of being wanted. But over time, something changes. The interaction starts feeling one-sided, not because he is doing anything wrong, but because his attention has no direction. In psychology, attention is a signal of value, but undirected attention signals dependence, and dependence lowers perceived respect. Now compare that to a man who gives attention, but with rhythm. He is present, but not constantly reachable. He engages, but he also disappears into his own life. That creates contrast, and contrast creates curiosity. Here's the key psychological mechanism. Humans assign higher value to signals that are not freely or constantly available. This is tied to scarcity perception and attention salience in cognitive psychology. But there's an even deeper layer. When your attention has direction, meaning you give it based on your choice, not emotional impulse, you communicate self-governance. And self-governance is one of the strongest predictors of respect in social dynamics. Practical shift. Stop reacting to every moment of silence or delay. Stop filling every gap in communication just to prevent disconnection. Instead, build a life that does not collapse when someone is not actively engaging with you. Because the moment your attention becomes selective, it becomes valuable. And when attention becomes valuable, respect starts to grow naturally. But there is still one final layer that brings everything together. And most men only understand it after they've already lost interest from someone they cared about. Transition. And this is where perception flips completely. Let me ask you something directly. Have you ever noticed that the moment you start trying harder to be liked, things quietly start slipping in the opposite direction? Not immediately. Slowly. Less respect, less initiative from her side, more distance. Here's the counterintuitive truth. Attraction doesn't just respond to what you do, it responds to what your behavior implies about your internal state. And if your behavior implies that you need approval to feel secure, then even your best actions start losing impact. There is a moment in every interaction where a man either reinforces his own self-respect or quietly abandons it. It can be as small as accepting disrespectful humor, or agreeing to plans that don't work for him, or staying in conversations where he is clearly not being valued just to avoid awkwardness. Individually, these moments seem small, but psychologically, they accumulate into identity perception. When someone consistently sees you adjusting yourself downward to maintain connection, they don't consciously think he has low self-respect, but they feel it. And feelings guide respect more than logic ever will. Now imagine a different pattern. A man who doesn't overreact, but also doesn't tolerate subtle disregard. He doesn't punish people emotionally. He simply corrects direction or removes himself when needed. That creates a very different psychological impression. It communicates, I value connection, but not at the expense of myself. And this is where the real shift happens. Because women don't just respond to confidence in words, they respond to evidence of self-prioritization under pressure. This is why two men can say the same things, but only one is fully respected. One is saying it from need, the other is saying it from stability. And that difference is everything. So when you think about being liked versus being respected, don't see them as personality traits. See them as signals. Likability is often produced when you reduce friction for others. Respect is produced when you maintain alignment with yourself even when it creates friction. And healthy attraction usually requires both, but in the right order. Here's the deeper truth most people eventually realize in their relationships. If you spend your life optimizing to be liked, you may collect attention, but you slowly lose clarity about who you are in other people's eyes. But when you build respect first, something stabilizes. People may not always immediately warm up to you, but they start taking you seriously. And from that seriousness, genuine attraction has space to grow. Because respect creates emotional safety that is not dependent on performance. And that is what mature attraction actually responds to. Not perfection, not constant availability, not endless agreeableness, but grounded presence. The kind of presence that doesn't collapse when things get uncertain and doesn't disappear when validation is missing. And when a man carries that, everything changes quietly. He stops chasing how he is perceived and starts embodying how he chooses to show up. And ironically, that is often when he becomes both more respected and more genuinely liked. Not by everyone, but by the people who actually matter. If this resonated with you, it probably means you've already noticed some of these patterns in your own relationships, even if you didn't have the words for them. The real question is this: where in your life are you still optimizing for being liked instead of being respected? Think about that honestly. And if you want to go deeper, the next video explores something closely connected to this: why emotional availability without boundaries slowly reduces attraction over time, even when intentions are good. Because understanding attraction isn't about learning tricks, it's about understanding signals and learning how not to betray your own. And maybe that's the real shift: not becoming someone different, but finally becoming consistent enough that your presence says the same thing you believe about yourself.